Hello, true unbelievers or believers in something else. This is Chad Lang here, and I'm going to be continuing my reading of Recovering Agency Lifting the Veil of Mormon Mind Control by Luna Lindsay Corbden. We are in chapter 4, which is Don't Just Get Over It, Recover. So, continuing on, this next section is Though hard to you this journey may appear, dot, dot, dot. The fact that most people who leave cults will have a high number of negative mental, emotional, and situational difficulties is non controversial among cult researchers. I've compiled a comprehensive list taken from multiple books. Depression, low self worth, anxiety, panic attacks, phobias, paranoia, flashbacks, nightmares, insomnia, eating disorders, restlessness, lack of direction, memory loss, self blame, guilt, shame, anger and rage, confusion, sense of betrayal, loss of concentration, and blurring of mental acuity, the feeling of being in a fog, feeling lost, loneliness, isolation and alienation, indecisiveness, floating, or slipping into dissociative or altered states, uncritical passivity, the fishbowl effect, feeling scrutinized or watched, no longer feeling chosen or special, confusion about morality, confusion about personal goodness, financial problems, excessive doubt, fear of joining new groups, and distrust of professional services, distrust of personal decision making ability, relationship issues, culture shock, identity issues, employment issues. That's quite the list. And actually, I'll read this before I show the graph here. Research by Margaret Thaler Singer and Richard Offshee found signs of temporary psychosis in otherwise healthy individuals, as well as post traumatic stress, dissociative disorders, psychosomatic illnesses, cognitive inefficiencies, phobias, and self harm. Effects on family relationships are particularly difficult for the Mormons. Families are forever, except when family members go astray. And there's this graph here that Luna Lindsay has shown us. I just want to get a clear picture of that so you can take a look at this graph and maybe pause it and read it. So I hope that you have a good view of it there. And then I'm going to continue on. Severing very often occurs either because the apostate is shunned or because the LDS family focuses so heavily on the gospel as to be alienating. As Jack B. Worthy said, leaving the Mormon reality dome usually damages family relationships in painful ways. So people with traits and personalities that clash with the culture suffer whether they stay or go. Self-blame can exacerbate all the negative effects. As Captive Hearts describes, already prone to much self-doubt, former cult members easily fall prey to obsessional thoughts about the nature of reality, the truth about the leader or group, and especially about whether or not they did the right thing by leaving. And ex-cult members may further berate themselves by analyzing their unhappiness according to the cult's doctrines, which always places the cult on top and the member on the bottom. All these people unknowingly participate in victim blaming because they don't understand cults. As you can see, leaving a high demand group is not easy. Other factors can complicate recovery. Individuals with a prior history of emotional problems are also more likely to experience emotional problems while in the group. Therefore, they more commonly require psychotherapeutic interventions following their cult departure. This is compounded by the fact that members with emotional or family problems are referred to LDS Family Services, which can keep that person within the closed logic of the church. While many find relief in modern therapeutic practices through LDS therapists, strict adherence to some doctrines might reinforce problems. For instance, unlike mainstream psychologists, most LDS therapists still counsel that masturbation is a sin. I hear they've loosened up on that. Since this one point can be the source of severe shame and self-loathing, a client will find no relief where she ordinarily would. Likewise, a woman who is stressed from trying to follow the church's high standards of motherhood might not receive permission to slow down and take care of herself. Victims of sexual abuse might be further victim blamed to mirror what they've heard from their abuser, culture, family, and bishop. And addictions may continue to be moralized as sins rather than psychological disorders which respond best to treatment. Those who suffer from extreme difficulties like self-harm, eating or sleeping disorders, panic attacks, anxiety or depression, or severe dissociative episodes should seek help from secular mental health professionals. You don't necessarily need to find a cult exit counselor. Any good mental health professional can assist with these problems, but be sure to inform them of your background, since experience in a high-demand group can simulate other mental disorders. Treatment may not be the same. Refer professionals to books like Recovery from Cults as a starting source. So I want to talk about therapists for a minute. I had an LDS Family Services therapist. It was a male. It was an older man. And something that keeps cropping up when I read about these, and it was true for my own experience, is you cannot have any faith issues. As soon as you have faith issues, this old man is saying the exact same things that the old man, when I was 11 years old, that I confessed to, that I was having some problems with, reacted in the exact same manner of, you're a natural born apostate. Oh no, you're one of those people who's emotionally vulnerable to the devil, and they offer no solutions. You just, I guess, pray more, immerse yourself more, self-indoctrinate more, read your scriptures more. You cannot question. You cannot look at the world around you and see the differences in the church and the world, and see different personality types, and wonder how these other people outside the group are behaving. You cannot point out things that are in the culture that are detrimental to your emotional health if you notice these things going on. You have to believe in the church. And if you have any issue with believing in the church, you're a natural born apostate, you're emotionally weak, you're morally weak, and you're going to hell. Okay? That is, so this LDS family, I already had a bias because he reminds me of this other person in my past that I had a traumatic experience with as a small child. One that led me to carry around guilt and shame my entire childhood life. Guilt and shame that was not necessary because I was a good kid, I was obedient, I stayed out of trouble, I followed the rules, and I wanted to, and I did not need that burden placed upon me by telling an 11-year-old boy that you're a natural born apostate. So that's my problem with LDS Family Services right there. And while I was seeing him, the bishop told me, oh, you want to see someone who's Mormon because they understand your problems better. Really, the bishop wants to keep it in-house. That is his motivation. And I was seeing, because I tried to commit suicide back in 2006 when this was happening, I was also seeing a therapist at Alberta Health Services for that. So I was seeing a female therapist, a secular one, at the same time that I was seeing an LDS Family Services therapist who reminded me of this traumatic experience that I had with this old man. Okay. And let's just say I like the female therapist better, and I found her to be more helpful. However, it is hard to find an unbiased therapist when it comes to Mormonism. There was another therapist that I saw 2013, 2014, or 2012. It would have been 2012. And as soon as I mentioned the word Mormon, he did not like the Mormons very much. And when you're struggling with that and you're wrestling with that, you don't necessarily want a biased therapist that doesn't like that group very much when you're still trying to figure it out. So you need to find a therapist that is understanding and supportive. So good luck with that. So, and we do in our group, we recommend that people seek professional mental help. And there's not a whole lot of people who are doing cult recovery mental help, we find, which is why we do our support group. And we would love to have therapists contact us and be a part of our peer support group and offer their expertise. Anyways, moving on. Born under the covenant. When a seal is put upon the father and mother, it secures their posterity so that they cannot be lost, but will be saved by virtue of the covenant of their father and mother. Prophet Joseph Smith. And that is in History of the Church. They don't give a page number. Most cult recovery books assume members are converted rather than born into their high demand group. For Mormons, this is usually reversed. Recovery books help readers remember their pre-cult identity. For most of us, that road is difficult. We don't have a pre-Mormon identity. Children born or raised within a cult grow up in a closed, controlled environment where bizarre, unorthodox, and harmful beliefs, values, and mores are accepted. When someone raised in a cult leaves it, that person may truly feel like a stranger in a strange land, or the man born out of time, and may have difficulty adapting to the dominant non-cult society. Cult life may have delayed emotional and educational development. It may have hampered medical needs. In addition, the child may have suffered physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. For me, I'm just going with emotional. And a common and serious problem for children in cults. Thankfully, the LDS Church allowed us some exposure into mainstream culture. Most of us were given access to medical treatment, though familial abuse is prevalent in LDS families. It is not officially encouraged, but it's still a huge problem, and it's a huge problem in my or it was a huge problem in my family. Though rated R movies were verboten, we were allowed to watch other movies. While rock and roll might have been banned in some of our more zealous families, we could overhear enough. Most of us were educated in public schools, although I wasn't, the author says. We could participate in sports, read books and magazines within limits, eat most normal foods, wear relatively normal clothes, and generally had enough exposure to the mainstream to make the transition. However, the limits that were placed on us can make our upbringing a little odd, especially for those who did not sow wild oats, were raised in more sheltered or abusive households, or who lived in the Mormon corridor, where outside culture is Mormonized. The lack of exposure to the world during high school and college has effects. From captive hearts, there are developmental tasks to be completed, such as individuation and separation from the family. There are educational and career choices to be made. And there are issues about dating, sex, and marriage to explore. Cult members do not get the opportunity to pass through these normal developmental stages and experiences, and sometimes complain of being 30 and 40-year-old teenagers when they get out of the cult. This is why many ex-Mormons describe going through an adolescent phase where no matter their age, they spend a year or two acting like teenagers, experimenting with music, movies, fashion, pastimes, sex, alcohol, and drugs. We faced moral and philosophical questions we never before confronted. It's a whirlwind of fresh experiences, and suddenly life is brand new again. Decisions are not always made with the wisdom of an experienced adult because this adult has been sheltered and now must make them without the parental safety net. Some ex Mormons, suddenly free from isolation and depression, may be in danger of going too far and experimenting with substances and lifestyles, and may fall into the very perils the church warned of: alcoholism, drug addiction, broken relationships, sexually transmitted diseases, and unwanted pregnancy. How ironic. The church labeled many things sinful, but just because the church exaggerated the consequences of sin, in quotes, does not mean you should do the exact opposite of everything they said once you get out. Caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, revealing clothing, sex, pornography, and even drugs and new religions may be safe to explore, but only in moderation, with full awareness of the risks and with assurance that you can fulfill your responsibilities towards self, children, spouse, career, education, and safety. This is the time for you to learn to make your own decisions, and it can be both scary and rewarding. Consequences, both positive and negative, are now yours to reap. It is best to take this phase with caution. Fortunately, the internet is a great resource. I highly recommend researching any topic about which you have doubts. Awareness and education can lead to a safe, sane, and consensual life full of moderated choices. Identity issues were perhaps the most difficult for me during this phase. I was a person held together by the glue of LDS ideology. As I proudly told the world, I am Mormon. I am. To no longer be that means I didn't know who I was. The impact of disillusionment cannot be overstated, especially for those of us who knew no other identity from birth. We then are free from toil and sorrow too. Know this, that every soul is free to choose his life and what he'll be. That is an LDS hymn, number 240. Freedom is born in the moment I decide I am free to move away from what has previously imprisoned me. Sam Keen, Hymns to an Unknown God. The Apostle John said, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." John 8:32. Lots of people like to co-opt this phrase, especially those who are selling truth. I assert you are the arbiter of truth. You get to decide what is meaningful. Maybe this book is full of crap. You can judge it on its merits along with every other thing. Martha Beck said, "I am free and always have been free to accept my own reality, free to trust my perceptions, free to believe what makes me feel sane, even if others call me crazy, free to disagree, even if it means great loss, free to seek the way home until I find it." I resist anyone who claims exclusive coverage of truth. I retain my freedom to move away from that which imprisons me, be it religions, commercial enterprises, relationships, or fitness programs. I value my hard-won liberty way too much. I am now in charge and get to decide what works best for me and what doesn't. As they say in 12-step groups, take what you like and leave the rest. By like, I don't mean meaningless temporary pleasures. I mean I get to judge what is important to me and what offers the lasting happiness I seek. There is life after Mormonism. I and thousands of other ex-Mormons are living joyfully, free from guilt, shame, closed logic structures, blinders, and monopolized time. Rather than follow rote rules, I make my own choices based on wise consideration of pros and risks. I've learned what I really want from life. I am free to pursue dreams which were impossible before. I have many friends with similar interests who accept me for who I am, not who I'm pretending to be. I've got confidence, the career I want, and the family I want. I am a square peg who has made my own square hole. Joe Kelly, a former member of Transcendental Meditation and the International Society of Divine Love, recounts, "Back in the world now, I found it to be so very different from what they taught. Cults had taught me that all worldly relationships were mundane and ultimately meaningless, self-centered, and based on what others could take from you. I learned how caring and helpful my true friends and family could be. They accepted me as I was. They didn't require absolute belief or use pressure." Adam had to break one commandment to thrive, to fulfill the purpose of all existence. He had to learn that which God had forbidden. Just as eating the fruit, set Adam and Eve free from their beautiful and confining garden, so shall the truth set you free. Perhaps God's real test is this: can you sacrifice ignorant bliss on the altar of knowledge? Will you trade milk for meat? Will you put away childish things and finally grow into adulthood? So, we have a new chapter called Slippery Sources. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to stop right there. Just some closing thoughts. Actually, I lost what I was going to think. So I'm just going to leave it right there. This is Chad Lang. This is Recovering Agency, Lifting the Veil of Mormon Mind Control. The next chapter, which looks pretty short, is called Slippery Sources. Truth is eternal and verifiable versus truth depends on who you ask. And so that is the next chapter in Recovering Agency, Lifting the Book of Mormon Mind Control. I'm Chad Lang. Have a nice life.